Hi everybody, I am the Commerce Specialist. Welcome to my channel. My channel is all about content covering various academic qualifications and professional certifications. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing and press the bell notification button so that you get my videos on a timely basis. The topic for today's video is very interesting and technical as well. We are going to talk about Auditors Professional Liability. Today we are going to talk about what if auditors make a mistake? What if they are negligent? What happens then to all these issues? We call them professional liability for auditors. So first of all, we need to know why this topic is so important. Please understand, auditors are also human beings. Like any other professionals, engineers, doctors, architects, lawyers, auditors also have risk of being sued by the client. We need to understand that auditors are under contractual obligations with their client. And if there is a breach of any provision, they can be sued. Now I'm going to give you some examples where auditors can be sued by their clients. The very first one is in case of insolvency. The insolvency law says that auditors are considered as officers of the company. And auditors can be charged with criminal offense if they are found guilty and liable to matters relating to winding up of the companies. Another area where auditors may be sued by the client is financial market abuse offense. Now, what is financial market abuse offense? These are offenses relating to insider trading. And we all understand that auditors are bound by professional ethics. One of the principles of professional ethics is confidentiality. So, while conducting an audit, auditors do get to know many things, but they're supposed to keep it confidential. And if that confidentiality is breached, they could be booked under the offense of insider trading, and obviously that's a matter of concern for auditors. And among many, I'm just quoting few. The third example is if you are an auditor, you are auditing a company. While auditing the company, obviously you come across many records and you interview people, you watch people, you observe. So what if an auditor suspects the client or any employee of the client involved in money laundering? And if that is the case, if the auditor fails to report his suspicion to the appropriate level of authority, then again auditor can be booked for negligence. So when we're talking about negligence, what is negligence? We call it tort of negligence. When we talk about tort of negligence, what happened under this is compensation is given to a person who has suffered a loss due to wrongful neglect of other party. If I give you example other than auditing, even doctors, engineers, architects, lawyers, they all can be booked for negligence by their clients. So as an auditor, you need to understand, if your client is booking you for negligence, the burden of proof lies on the client. The client has to prove 4 points. Number one, duty of care exists, which is enforceable by law. The other thing is that duty of care was breached by the auditor, and that breach caused a loss or damage to the client. And the fourth one is the harm was not too remote a consequence of breach. Now everything the auditor does not affect the client. Now everything the auditor does not brings loss to the customer, the client. So the client has to prove these 4 points. Now the other issues the auditor needs to understand is who could possibly claim for negligence? Who could possibly sue the auditors? People who could sue the auditors are number one, the company itself, the client company, the shareholders of the client company. It could be a bank, it could be any lenders, or maybe third parties who are directly or indirectly affected by auditors' negligence. So there are many people who are sitting and waiting for auditors to make a mistake, and then they come after the auditor. So please remember, as an auditor, you got to be very careful in your conduct. Now, having discussed that auditors do face a threat, a risk of being sued, being dragged into a legal battle. Now, what audit companies can do or an individual auditor can do? How can they avoid getting into litigation? So there are a few things auditors or audit companies need to be very vigilant about. So the very first thing audit companies and auditors need to look at is the client acceptance procedure. So when you're accepting a new audit, if there is a proposal, if a client approaches you, they want you to audit them, obviously auditors have a client screening process. And it's a huge list, but what I need to focus on here is you need to look at the history of the client. Has the client sued auditors in the past? If those occurrences are high, it's better to stay away from those clients, because this client is habitual. They are looking for auditors' mistake, and they have a history of suing auditors every now and then. So it's better not to accept those clients which have been suing their auditors in the past. The other thing is performance of audit. Please understand, gone are the days when audit companies used to do audit the way they want. Now we have standards, professional standards, international standard on auditing. So if you're an auditor or an audit company, make sure you perform audit in accordance with international standard of audit, in accordance with the local laws and regulations, so that your act is very much legal. The third factor which audit companies and auditors should keep in mind is the quality control. When I say quality control, we are talking about quality control of an individual audit and quality control of the firm as a whole. And obviously, when I talk about quality control, there are many factors which can be discussed later on when we talk about ethics and quality control of audit. But here you need to keep in mind that through quality control, if you have a robust quality control procedures in audit, you are far from the danger zone. Now, having discussed all these things, that auditors and audit companies do face a risk of being sued. So what can they do? How can they restrict their professional liability? So, ladies and gentlemen, please understand that audit companies, depending on the jurisdiction, they have a choice to get insured. And there are two types of insurance. So one is professional indemnity insurance. It is an insurance which is purchased by audit companies, which protects them against civil claims made by their clients or third parties arising out in relation to the work taken up by the audit firms. So the second option is Fidelity Guarantee Insurance. So Fidelity Guarantee Insurance protects the audit company against liability arising out from acts of fraud or dishonesty on part of any director, partner or employee of the audit company, especially for goods or cash which is entrusted to them. So now auditors and audit companies need not worry. They have two different types of insurances: Professional Indemnity Insurance and Fidelity Guarantee Insurance, which obviously helps the auditors in reducing their liability towards such claims. So one thing here you need to remember is that these insurances, even if taken, does not reduce auditors' liability. But what it does is, if there is a liability claim, if auditors have been sued and they have to pay compensation, at least the amount of these compensation which the audit firm has to pay is somehow capped and reduced. Why? Because they have an insurance and they will get some claims from the insurance company, so that the amount they are paying is either fully covered or partly covered. So obviously the loss to the audit company is mitigated. So now there are some current issues when we talk about auditors' professional liability, and the two issues which are very important is, one is known as proportionate liability and the other is known as capping of liability. Now we need to understand what is proportionate liability. Under proportionate liability, the loss which the injured party is claiming is split between the auditor and the directors of the client. This loss is split between the auditor and the directors of the company, and this split is decided by a judge who would decide and see where the fault lies, whether the fault lies with the auditors or the directors of the company who were responsible, and accordingly the loss is split between the auditors and the directors of the company. Because obviously both have a duty of care. The auditor has a duty of care to the client, the directors have a duty of care to the company. So the judge will decide who was negligent and to what extent. But this sort of arrangement requires shareholders' approval. The next one is capping of liability. So under capping of liability, what happens is we set a maximum limit an auditor would have to pay in case of any litigation or compensation. So this is decided beforehand. The audit firm or the partners would tell the client, okay, if you want us to audit, this is what's going to happen in case of any adverse situation. This is the maximum what we are able to compensate to the injured party. So if I sum it up, auditors or audit firms have the option of limiting and reducing the compensation which they have to pay in adverse situation if they are forced into legal battle through professional indemnity insurance, fidelity guarantee insurance, proportional liability, and capping of liability. One thing important you need to remember is if insurance is purchased, whether it be any type of insurance, what is the cover of the insurance period? So when we talk about the cover, how long that the insurance cover? The insurance cover exists for 6 years even if the partner or the auditor has left the professional practice. So guys, I hope you have understood this topic. If you have any queries or questions relating to this topic, please leave a comment. I will respond to you as usual. Again, a humble request, if you are not yet subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, please share it with your dear and near ones so that others can also benefit. Thank you so very much for your precious time.